Northwest region. I work with the tribes in Oregon and Idaho. This morning, we will be listening to a presentation with Jaime Cortez. He is with PayneWest Insurance, and we're bringing you the Pasture, Rangeland, Forage, and Rain Index insurance information. Jaime has been working closely with the tribes out here in the Northwest. We really want to get this information out to as many tribal producers nationwide as we can, because the closing date on this is December 1st, and it's really beneficial insurance to have. So, Jaime, you can go ahead and start your presentation, and everybody welcome Jaime into Indian country and to make this presentation for us. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Catherine, for that warm introduction. I'm excited to be here as well. So just here's the agenda. We're going to do some introductions and then a little overview of crop insurance and some data and statistics and what pasture, rangeland, forage is, how it works, and then some examples for some Northwest tribes that I've presented to. And then we'll have some time at the end for a question and answer. And throughout the presentation, feel free to drop some questions in the chat box, and maybe Catherine, if you can help me with some of those, that would be fantastic. Again, first, thank you for this opportunity again, Catherine, for setting this up, and at least David and the other technical people that have helped to get this started. Even the graphics and registration and all those things, it takes a lot of effort and people to get these things going. So thank you. I do want to throw this in here. I'll be presenting at the annual IAC conference. I'm super excited. I saw the agenda the other day, and it's just going to be a great event to connect with people and share more information. And so my presentation on pasture, rangeland, and forage will be shared there as well. Again, I looked at that agenda, and it's going to be fantastic. So super excited to attend that conference. This is me, Jaime Cortez. I've been with PayneWest Insurance for the last over a year. Started with them in July of 2021 in our Yakima location. I am in the business insurance division, so I sell business and crop insurance. Prior to joining PayneWest, I spent 13 years in education. About 6 of those was in, or actually 7 of those was in higher education, in advising, and then another almost 6 years in high school teaching. So I got recruited to go back to my alma mater and teach high school. And then a good buddy of mine asked me to join PayneWest, and so I haven't looked back. And that was July of 2021. Born and raised in Toppenish, Washington, so that's on the Yakima Reservation. I grew up there, and my roots are there, but I'm in Yakima now. I'm married 11 years tomorrow, so I was super excited about that. 11. It'll be 11 years tomorrow with 3 children, ages 8, 4, and 3. And they're just a bundle of joy, right? These are our PayneWest locations. We're in the 4-state footprint of Montana, Idaho, Washington, Oregon. And again, our office is located in Yakima, and we've got other offices throughout the Northwest. And so we offer all your business insurance needs, personal insurance, employee health and benefits, and surety. What I'm focusing on primarily is ag and crop insurance. And so that's why we're here today. We were acquired by Marsh & McLennan, or Marsh. So many of you may have heard of them. So we're a Marsh & McLennan agency. So what that means is we have a greater network, larger footprint, we have some more resources, and we're able to serve more people across the United States in all states. So it's really great for us. And so some of you might be from other states, not in that 4-state footprint, but we can definitely work with you and serve you as well. And that's what we want to do. Quick question here. So if you don't mind typing in the chat box, I just want to know, what state you're in and maybe what tribe and or organization you represent. If you can take, 15, 20 seconds just to type your your response in that chat box, and then we'll move forward. I just want to know kind of where we're at. Okay. All right. Okay, moving on. Thank you for doing that. Partnerships, we can't do this alone. I think I met Catherine at the Northwest Tribal Agriculture Council regional conference in Pendleton in September. And it's been great since then, just connecting with other tribes here in the Northwest. We've kind of, took this show on the road, if you will, and we've just been traveling through Oregon and Idaho. I'm of course in Washington, so I've met with some Washington tribes as well. And so partnerships mean a lot. We can't do this alone. Intertribal Ag Council, thank you for allowing me to present today. Rain and Hail, which is the #1 approved insurance provider in the country. And their partnership here in the Northwest has just been, second to none. They're a great partner and resource for us. And then CropWest Insurance, Gary Heilig is a partner there. He's been fantastic for us. And his connection again with Rain and Hail as well. And I'll share with some of that throughout. And I believe those folks are on today too. So thank you for joining us, Rain and Hail and CropWest. I wanted to throw this in here. This came across my desk, my email earlier this week, I think Monday, and this is exciting. USDA is investing $3.3 million into partnerships to expand outreach on crop insurance and underserved producers. And so I think these partnerships mean a lot, as I just mentioned. And so IAC and RMA, Risk Management Agency, they're going to be working together to figure out how to expand that outreach, because from webinars that I've attended, material that I've read, is that tribes, they need tribal producers, they need support, they need resources, they need help to understand how these programs work, right? And partnering with FSA and those other organizations, it's important that we do that together so that we can help the producers and tribes thrive. My personal mission is to equip and educate underserved groups, right? People, organizations in ag, and using risk management strategies, because what that means is it allows for them to thrive. Ag is so important to us. It is food security, it is job security. And so without proper risk management strategies, businesses can go under. And so it's our job to equip and educate them so that they can make the best decisions, informed decisions about their business and for their people as well. So that means a lot to me. We're going to go over some crop insurance, a quick overview of it. So the Federal Crop Insurance Corporation, they administer the Federal Crop Insurance Program. So they approve policies, insurance plans, modifications to existing plans. RMA, which is the Risk Management Agency, they manage the FCIC, the Federal Crop Insurance Corporation. And so they provide the products to farmers and ranchers. And it's their responsibility to ensure an adequate food supply, keep food prices fair for farmers and consumers, and protect and sustain the country's vital natural resources. The Federal Crop Insurance Program, it's permanent. It started in 1980 with the Crop Insurance Act of 1980, and it's built into the Farm Bill. So it's designed to make it affordable and available to farmers and ranchers in the United States. So it's not going away. It's permanent. It's there, and we need it. Our farmers, ranchers, they need it. Crop insurance is a safety net to help recover after severe weather-related events, especially with weather and patterns and what's going on now. It's so unpredictable that it can devastate they can devastate a business, right? A producer, a farmer. And so it's important to have these safety nets there. And it's to keep producers from going out of business. RMA, Risk Management Agency, they work with the approved insurance providers to sell and service federal crop insurance policies in every state through a public-private partnership. So that partnership with the AIPs or approved insurance providers, it allows small and large producers to participate in crop insurance. And so that just makes it affordable through government subsidies as well. So with the crop insurance program, there are subsidies. And so that is huge. That's a benefit. And that's a way for any type of producer, small or large, to participate. And there are 13 AIPs in the U.S. who underwrite policies for crop insurance. There used to be several more, but with devastation and weather-related events, and less and less. But there are 13 right now. The rates. So the government sets the premium rates and subsidies. They're the same for all producers across the U.S. And so we like to say that the price is the price. So whether you want to go with producer A, crop agent A, crop agent B, crop agent C, it's the same. The premium rates are exactly the same. So it keeps it fair across the board. And everybody can participate, and you can't if somebody's going to try to give you a discount on crop insurance, they can't, right? That's illegal. So it's the same across the board, which is great about crop insurance. What I want to share with you here are 2018. So starting in 2018, I'm going to show you a couple of images from 2018 to 2022. RMA, again, Risk Management Agency, their crop indemnities. Indemnities just payments, right? So you can see here the coloration of the United States by state and by county. Down here at the bottom, white means no indemnity. Yellow, you can see that $1 to $500,000 in indemnity per county, and then so on and so forth, 500,000 to 1 million, 1 million to 5 million, 5 million to 10 million, and then over 10 million. So this was in 2018. So you can kind of find your area, your location, and see what that kind of looked like in terms of payments and indemnities. 2019, so it's getting a little darker, especially with drought, things going on, weather-related events, right? This can affect that, of course. 2020, getting really dark there. 2021, here in the eastern, I'm in Yakima right now, so eastern, kind of central, eastern Washington, you can see there. And then here is 2022, and we think, oh, well, shoot, it's getting better. Actually, they decided to change the dollar figures here, the indemnities. So down here at the bottom, the orange looking, or light orange, is $0 to $1 million. And then yellow is now 1 million to 10 million. So going back, you can see the difference, right? So those indemnities payments that are going out are getting greater. So now the dark maroon, if you will, is 50 million or more. IRI is the International Research Institute. So this is Columbia University's model to look at precipitation. And so we want to use as much data and information as possible to help producers make those informed decisions. And so using this data to, if we're helping a producer come up or write a PRF policy, then we can use this to make some of those decisions, which months, which intervals would we want to insure, and which ones do we not because of weather-related events, and so, or patterns. And this is January, February, March. And then you can see here February, March, April. So in the lower half of the United States, you can see it's going to be lower precipitation than normal. Up here in the Northwest, it might be some more precipitation above normal. January, February, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and then February, March, April, kind of in the eastern Washington, Idaho, and western part of Montana. So again, just using as much information as possible. And as this comes out, we like to look at it and share it with our producers. I want to throw in this reminder, emergency relief program, so this was disaster assistance. So your county had to qualify for a drought. And if it did, and you received an emergency relief payment, then you are required to purchase crop insurance for the next 2 years, or NAP, which is a non-insured crop disaster assistance program. I don't know how they came up with that acronym, but that's what it is, at a buy-up level for the next 2 crop years. And so I just wanted to throw that in there just to remind you, if you received any of those payments from 2020 or 2021, that you want to, or you'll need to sign up for crop insurance for the next 2 years, or NAP at a buy-up level. And then, throwing this in there as well, our goal is to, like I said, help and equip. And so if you're having any issues or challenges with, if you have a crop insurance policy and you're having a difficult time understanding that, let us know. We can kind of help you walk through that. And if it's, at the right time, et cetera, we can, transfer that policy and work with you. And that's what we want to do, is work with as many people as possible to get them the right information and help them make those right decisions. Came across the 2017 NASS study as I was listening to a webinar over the summer. I think it was Native American Ag Fund that was given a webinar, and so they were talking about the reservations and the NASS study and how they needed help for their producers, and so as I looked into that and researched it, came across that there were 73 reservations according to the study. And so when I'm thinking about how to help, and specifically pasture, range, and forage with all the land that they have, thinking, well, how many tribes within those reservations could benefit from pasture, range, and forage? And diving in a little bit more at the individual level, this image here, and I apologize for how small it is. Some of my takeaways from it are there are 79,198 producers or farmers at the individual level. They're American Indian, Alaska Native, and with that, there are 59 million acres. It's a lot of land. The top 5 states were Arizona, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Texas, and California. And so 68% of those producers live in those top 5 states, with 24,744 farms specializing in beef cattle. And so when we look at pasture, range, and forage, there's a correlation between beef cattle, right? So there's a livestock. And so this PRF, pasture, range, and forage program it's a forage type of program. If you have livestock, if you have hay, this is something that you want to look into. And so with this NASS study, it just opened my eyes and started on this journey to get this information out, because it is beneficial. Who has PRF within tribes? And just for the sake of anonymity, we don't want to disclose any clients, et cetera, without their permission. But as I was researching and speaking with folks in different tribes, these are some of the states that do have tribes in them that have a PRF policy. So Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, Washington, Idaho, Montana. I'm sure there are others, but these are the ones that I came across or I had spoken to, and so they are benefiting from it. These are tribes that I have reached out to, that I've spoken with at least one time or multiple times. Yakima Nation, Nez Perce Tribe, Cheyenne River Sioux, Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, Shoshone-Bannock of Fort Hall, Confederate Tribes of Umatilla, Colville Confederated Tribes, and then Kalispell Tribe of Indians. So just, again, trying to reach as many tribes as possible. And, I'm willing to drive and commute to share this information. And they're all over the place. So if we can meet, I'm willing to go over and meet with you. Another poll question here. before we jump into the PRF and how it works is, have you heard of PRF before today? And do you or does your tribe have a PRF policy? So if you would mind typing your answer in the chat box. Okay. Okay. Or the Q&A box. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for doing that. And so what I'm finding is, as I've been these last few meetings with some tribes, is that somebody, within the tribe that has a PRF policy, or they've heard of a PRF policy, and so, but they just don't quite understand how it works. And so it's been great to talk about it and kind of educate them on that, because it's important, right? You don't want to just say, okay, well, yeah, I've got this policy and I'm making money or I'm not making money. You want to understand how it works so that you can make some of those educated decisions, and then use information that's out there from RMA and the IRA mod or IRI model, so you can, again, take ownership in that as well. Super important here, as I've been speaking with producers, tribes, when it comes to PRF, there are two types, and those who have been doing it and those who have not heard of it. And those who have been doing it are doing it, and they're benefiting from it. Those who have not heard of it, and when we introduce it, it's very, very intriguing. And so that's why they want to learn more about it. And so when I shared this information with Catherine and Mike Schellenberger a few weeks ago in Rangeland, I was like, wow, well, let's get this information out there to as many tribes as we can. And so here's some loss ratios. And again, this is why those who have been doing it are continuing to do it, is it's 105%. This is national, 105% loss ratio. So anything above 100% is in favor of the producer. And then there's a farmer paid loss ratio, because this is a subsidized program. If we look at the indemnities divided by the subsidy, well, then the farmer paid loss ratio is greater. So again, it's just a great program to look into. Here is by year 2015 to 2022. This is just pasture, and forage. The number of acres that are being insured is climbing, and the total premium, right? So this just shows you that more and more producers are participating, more and more acres are being added because it is paying producers. When we were first taking this information out, we had this image here. So going by state, by year, and you can see the different loss ratios in those states. So if you're looking at whatever state you're in the next slide, I included more states for this presentation, but primarily we were working with these states. And but for the purpose of the presentation, I added a few more states, but you can kind of take a look at those loss ratios. So remember that anything above 100% is in the favor of the producer. And so I added Arizona, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Texas, California, Missouri, South Dakota, North Dakota. So you can see that it is, in the favor of the producer. And this is just the loss ratio. This is not the farmer paid loss ratio, which includes that subsidy, right? So very good for farmers and producers that are participating in it. So what is it? Pasture, Rangeland, Forage. So it's a rainfall index plan of insurance. It's an area-based plan. So at the equator, it starts at a 17 by 17 mile grid, but up here in the north, it's about a 12 by 12 mile grid. So wherever your land is, they associate a grid with that land. And so, with tribes, reservations, it can encompass a large amount of acres, a large amount of land. And so the land could, be across multiple grids, 7, 8, 9, 10 grids, depending on how big the land is. And so you associate your land with a specific grid or grids, and we can look at what the performance has been. And it's for producers who own, rent, or lease haying and or grazing land. And so for grazing, there's two types of practice, and we'll get into this in a second. But for grazing land, you must own the livestock. You have to own the livestock. So the insurable interest is in that. And livestock can include cattle, horses, swine, goats, sheep, bison, and buffalo. So again, you must own them. So why PRF? Well, producers depend on precipitation to grow forage crops to feed livestock. Right? So without that precipitation or sufficient precipitation, producers, they have to figure out other ways to water their forage crops and or feed their livestock. And sometimes they might have to transport their livestock to somewhere else. And when they transport, then they've got to, spend more gas money or more diesel, right? So it's really expensive to do that. Or they have to bring in more water to water those forage crops, which is more money. And so, with the cost of running a farm or ranch, it's getting higher. Everything is costing more and more money. And so with PRF, it can help reduce that burden that producers are having to withstand with those extra costs, right? And so this is a way to help with that. So you can use those funds that you receive to put back in business, to buy more feed, to buy more livestock, to whatever you see fit. It's going to benefit your business. Here are some quick facts about it. It is third-party data. So NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, their Climate Prediction Center, they're the ones who capture all the data, and they distribute that data to RMA, Risk Management Agency, and RMA distributes that data to the approved insurance providers for their policyholders. PRF became available in all 48 contiguous states, I believe in 2016. And so all states and all counties. And so that's why it's gaining ground. There are two practices, as I mentioned a little earlier. There's haying and grazing. For haying, you can have irrigated and non-irrigated land, or irrigated and non-irrigated forage crops. So that's huge, right? So this has nothing to do with if you have irrigated or an opportunity to irrigate your land or not. It's all based on the lack of precipitation. So if you hay alfalfa, timothy, or other forage crops, we can look at that and see if it qualifies for PRF. And then grazing, as I mentioned earlier, the interest is in the livestock, so you must own the livestock. There are no claims and no adjusters. It's based on just the data. So NOAA's data, and if it falls below the trigger, then you should be receiving an indemnity if we selected the right interval. And payments are solely based on the lack of precipitation in that grid and in the selected intervals. I like to say it's highly federally subsidized. So with this, the coverage levels range between 70% and 90%. So the higher coverage level means lower subsidy. So if you're at a 90% coverage level, then you can receive a 51% subsidy. If you're at the lower coverage level of 70%, then you would receive a 59% subsidy there. So again, between 51 and 59%, the government is paying that premium. Again, you must own the livestock. And with pasture, rangeland, forage, the premium is not due until the following year, until September of the following year. So it gives you a time to potentially, trigger some claims, or, produce a forage crop so you can sell that, make some money, or sell your livestock, right, as you normally would do, possibly get that money, the revenue, and then pay down your premium. So it's not due until September 1st of 2023, for example. The sales closing date is December 1st. So we're right around the corner with this. And that's why the push to get this out to as many tribes as possible. And really important that you must have a Form AD 1026 filed and submitted with your local FSA office, and that's a highly erodible land conservation and wetland conservation certification. I know it's a mouthful, but you want to have that filled out and submitted with your local FSA office, because that's how you'll receive your subsidy. And so you want to get that in before sales closing date. Without that, then you're going to be on the hook for the full premium, right? So we don't want that. Get that in so that you can receive your subsidy. How we strategize it matters. And so there are different strategies, and we like to work with the producers to show them kind of what that looks like. A conservative model, maybe a more enterprising, aggressive plan. We can look at those. But here are some questions that, and some key points that you want to answer or think about when we are looking at PRF, rain index. Is, well, how much would you pay for a good rain? Because you talk to producers, farmers, and, oftentimes, hey, we need rain, we need rain. Well, how much would you pay for a good rain? Do you have 1,000 acres? Do you have 100,000 acres? Some tribes or some reservations, they're 1 million acres or more, 2 million acres. So how much would you pay for a good rain for your forage or for your livestock? And when do you need it to rain as well? Because that can play a factor into how we strategize. It's a risk management strategy for producers who are in the haying, grazing, or livestock business. This is a long-term, big picture strategy. So we say 5+ years. You want to be kind of non-emotional about this, objective, look at the data. And if we look at a 5-year, 10-year run, we can go back 70 years if we want to of data, but looking at a 5-year, 10-year history, and you can see that it's paying out. And so you want to commit to this. So, if you get into this 1 year, first year, and it doesn't pay out, and you have to pay your premium or a portion of your premium, stick with it, because the data doesn't lie. Stick with it. You will benefit from it. Now, this is Mother Nature. Nothing is ever guaranteed with Mother Nature, right? We can't say that. We can't out-predict Mother Nature. We can't out-strategize Mother Nature. But based on the history and the data that we have, you can see that it is going to benefit you. So stick with it. I mentioned it earlier that you can use the money, the indemnities, the payments to grow and expand your businesses, or fill or meet other areas, or give back to your people. It can change lives, and you have the land. So why not let this work for you and explore it, because it's something worthwhile. And if it, in certain grids, in certain areas, if it doesn't make sense, then we will tell you, hey, this doesn't make sense for you. So it's important that we have those dialogues and those talks and how we strategize. This is one example, and I know, with tribes and how sometimes they have a shared lease or shared commitment, if you will. Here's an example of how this could potentially work. If you have multiple tribal members and they are able to graze in a certain area, and they each have a certain number of head, and so we can strategize on how that, or what that share would look like. But in this example, if you have 10,000 acres of federal land, you have one person, John, right, who's allocated for 100 head of livestock, and then the other 3 livestock owners are allocated, a total of 3,000 head. Well, John has 25% share of those 10,000 acres, and so when we can strategize and put the policy together, it would be John that has that 25% share. That's just an example. Or the tribe could, take out the PRF policy for the entire, reservation and then work with their producers in distributing those funds. And, there's no limit to, I shouldn't say limit, but we can structure this however it makes sense to the tribe and the producers. We want to benefit them. So let's look at some land, some tribal land in different states, and these are some analysis that I've done with different tribes in different states. And again, for the sake of anonymity, I blocked out the county, because if I had the county, you'd probably guess who it was. And I just wanted to keep that, just anonymous. But this is an example of Idaho, 250,000 acres of grazing. This is an even distribution. And what that means is we're electing 20% of the acres of those 250,000 acres in 5 different 2-month intervals. For PRF, you've got to select at least 2 2-month intervals, and at most you can go 6 of those 2-month intervals. And the coverage has to add up to 100%. So for this particular strategy, we selected 20% of those acres in February, March, 20% April, May, 20% June, July, and 20% August, September, and another 20% in October, November. So that adds up to 100%. Here in these columns that are highlighted yellow, those were the intervals, right? And so we can use all of that data to determine what's the best strategy for your specific grid, your land, et cetera. And this is a good distribution of risk. This is what the coverage analyzer looks like with rain and hail. Anywhere you see shades of pink, that means that year in that interval, it paid out, okay? And across here on the bottom right-hand corner, we look at the loss ratio. I like to see as many yellow rows as possible in this column, because that means that year with this strategy, it favored the producer. And so then I ran some analysis from this specific graphic here, and this is what we came up with. So on 250,000 acres of grazing, it's 20%, right? Even distribution. 9 out of the 10 years paid out since 2013. So that's really good. Consistent performance. It's a suitable risk distribution, right? You're not swinging for the fences and putting all your eggs in kind of 2 intervals, but you're distributing that risk throughout the year. The producer premium. So in this case, the producer would have paid on 250,000 acres is $569,858. Okay, the subsidy is 51%, because this is at a 90% coverage level. And then the total premium would have been $1,162,975. So with this, a running total since 2013. So if this producer decided to have this policy, a 20% even distribution, we did nothing, we kept everything the same, the running total, this is net, running total since 2013 would have been $5,511,584. So that's an average of, over $500,000 per year since 2013. And to date, 2022, and we're still awaiting data, it says October, November, because we're in November with this strategy. To date, the indemnities would have been $1.1 million to date, and the year's not over. So in 10 years' time, on 250,000 acres in this specific grid, what could you do with $5.5 million? And that's a significant amount of money. And over here, you can see per year, 2013 to 2022, what the net payment would have been. And that's your indemnity, so your payment minus the premium. So this is just net. As I mentioned, only 1 year did not pay out, and that was 2017. And in 2017, they would have only had to pay $53,340, right? Not the full premium of $569,000, because it still rained that year. And you want it to rain, of course, but this is just a kind of a fallback, a safety net, if you will. But anyway, they did not have to pay their full premium. They had to pay, $53,000 of that, just that 1 year. Here's another example of Oregon, 250,000 acres of grazing. This is an odd distribution. So selecting the intervals of January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. So again, this is I think a 6-year look back and loss ratios, 5 out of those 6 years paid out. Here's the kind of analysis of that. 250,000 acres of grazing, odd distribution, 5 out of the 6 years paid out since 2016. Consistent performance again, suitable risk distribution. The premium, the producer premium on this would have been $476,522, 51% subsidy, brings the total premium to $972,498. Since 2016, the running net total would have been $3,493,998. Average net is $582,000. So that's, again, significant. 6 years, what could you do with $3.4 million? And to date, indemnities to date for this specific grid is $760,338. And we're still waiting on data from November, December interval. So that would have paid their premium already, the producer premium. Over here on the right, so just that 1 year, 2016, they would have had to pay $217,000. 2017 would have netted $304,000. 2018, $1 million. You can see that. So for a running total of $3.4 million. Another example in Idaho, so you kind of get the picture of what it can do. This is a different grid, 31555, 125,000. Oops, it's actually 125,000 acres of grazing. Excuse me, that's a typo there. Loss ratios down here, right? Since 2012, it's paid out every year from 2012 to 2021. And here's that analysis. And again, it was 125,000 acres, I believe. But 20% even distribution, paid out every year since 2012. Premium on this would have been $363,191, 51% subsidy, bringing the total premium to $741,207. Running total since 2012, $5,767,804 for a net of $480,650 per year since 2012. And to date, 2022, payments would have been $913,376. So still waiting on some of those on 2 months, November, December interval. So what could you do with 5.7 million in 10 years time? And you can see what the payouts would have been. Last year, 2021, in this grid, payout would have been 2.6 million, right, just in that 1 year last year. This is Washington. I didn't do the analysis like I did before, but I just wanted you to see that, some of these larger reservations and multiple tribes within the reservation, right? How they can benefit. This is 1 million acres. So since 2011, had they done 1 million acres on with an even distribution, they would have netted $69,636,717. Another grid, South Dakota. This is, I believe, 1.8 million acres. So you can see the distribution up here. So 5 intervals, but we kind of mixed it up a little bit with the percentages. So 25% January, February, 10% March, April, 15% June, July, September, October was 25%, November, December is 25%. And that's just based on the years paid and how it's performed. And since 2012 to 2021, the running total on this on 1.8 million acres would be $31,020,246. And 2 years did not pay out back to back, 2018, 2019. And again, you would have had to pay based on the loss ratios, would have to pay your full premium both those years. And that's a huge hit. But as I mentioned before, if you stick with it for 5+ years, you can see the benefits. And so they bounce back, the next 2 years. And, 2020 was 5.2 million. And then 2021 was 9.4 million in net total. So stick with it, right? I want to be too emotional about it. Here's another grid, South Dakota. This is 1.5 million acres, even distribution. Excuse me, not an even distribution, but at 20%. And these intervals, and then a 40% in June, July, because that was pretty good year. And then, excuse me. Here we go. So in, what is that? 7-8 years from 2015 to 2021, running total is $29,607,000. So again, these are just different strategies that we can explore. Those are just some examples. I know those are large numbers of acres. And so if we can look at it from the tribe's perspective and see how we can benefit our people, our producers, that's one way to look at it. If we want to look at it from an individual producer level, we can do that as well with smaller numbers of acres, and we can do that as well. Forms, what forms and documents are needed. So if you're interested, well, what does that look like? Is it a long process? Well, the application needs to be signed by December 1st. We submit that. You want to submit that AD 1026 conservation compliance form to receive the subsidies. Submit that before December 1st. We would need maps, fields, or if you're working with FSA, they already have your farm track field numbers, or section township range or GIS data. If as much information as we can have to locate where your acres are, where your land is, how many acres they are by practice, by haying or grazing. You'll also want to have ready your ownership of your cattle, right? Documents to prove that you own the cattle or livestock. I shouldn't just say cattle, but it's livestock. We would need the entity name, EIN or tax ID number, social security number or numbers, right? If there are multiple people on the policy. And then whoever has 10% or more, SBI stands for substantial beneficial interest. So whoever has 10% or more of that interest on the policy or in that land, we would need them to be on the application. And so this is what the application looks like. The second page of this application is really just 6 questions and a signature. So it's not very detailed on the application side. It's really the work comes from the mapping and locating where all your land is and the structure of it. I'm including some other slides in here because with PRF, typically you'll have some livestock. These are some other options, and I just want to throw these in there. And then, for a later date, we can discuss these, but livestock risk protection, if you have cattle, which it's grazing, right? We're looking at PRF, you'll have some cattle, and this is just protecting you from declining prices in the market. So we can look at LRP for you as well, if you want to explore that. And this is just those declines in the cattle market and swine as well. You can insure unborn calves now. And so this is new. So we can look at that. There are different sales endorsements periods. We call them endorsement periods from 13 weeks all the way to 52 weeks. There's feeder cattle, fed cattle, and swine. So, if you have any of those types of livestock, maybe this is something you'll want to explore as well. And this is subsidized as well, between 35% and 55% subsidy. And you can insure between 70% of that price all the way up to 100% of your price. So again, it's protecting the downward price risk. And then because you have, several acres, 100 acres, thousands of acres of pasture land, you may want to explore pasture fire coverage, because there are, fires that happen in the Northwest, especially with drought and the heat of the summer. You may want to explore what that looks like. And this is a fairly reasonable price for pasture fire coverage. And then there's hay fire. And if you have haystacks that the hay's very, very expensive. And so if those go up in flames and you're not properly covered, well, that's a lot of money that you lost. And so you want to protect that. And so those are some other, plans and programs that we can explore for you if you're interested in that. Questions and comments. And so my question here is, how can we be of service to IAC? I mentioned earlier, I want to partner. I want to help any way possible. I'd love to hear from you. Let us know how we can help you. And again, the partnerships that we have with IAC now, Rain and Hail and CropWest, you won't find a better team and support. And so what can we do? So any questions, comments?
Jaime,
Yes.
got a couple of questions that came through the Q&A.
Sure.
Latana is asking for you to explain the productivity factor on the spreadsheet.
Okay, good question. Okay, so we'll take this one for example, the productivity factor. So the county value, so they establish a value for your land based on the county. So that's established, right? We have no say over that. And so with the productivity factor, you can insure up to 150% of that, right? You can go up to 150% of that county value, and you can go as low as 60% of that county value. So what this is, it just kind of plays with that value, and that kind of manipulates what the premium could look like for you. So if you feel like your value, even though it's not a factor in how the PRF pays out, but you might say, well, the value of my land per acre is greater than $12.10. So you can insure a higher value up to 150% of that, or you can go down lower to 60% of that county value. So again, that's just a way to kind of play with the premium. So if premium looks a little high for you at 150% productivity factor, well, then we can play with that and drop that down. And the reason why we have 150% productivity factor is because we're trying to maximize what this can do, right? We don't want to change the coverage level. The coverage level we want to keep at 90%, which is the max. So anything that drops below 90% of the historical average for that grid and those intervals, you're going to receive a payment. But we can play in with the productivity factor between 60% and 150%. I hope that explains that.
And we have a question from Fanny Brewer. She is the Great Plains Technical Assistant Specialist for Intertribal Agriculture Council. She is in South Dakota, and she is asking if there are any producers from Nebraska participating.
Good question. Let's see, Gary or Nick or Andy on here, they would know. I haven't met any producer yet personally in Nebraska, but I'm sure they are aware of producers in Nebraska. Let's see if they can type in the chat, Gary or Nick, Ross, or Andy. Because yeah, we can't disclose, those names or et cetera, but I haven't come across one in Nebraska yet.
Okay.
And I'm sure there are, but let's see. Well, I'm sure there are. And I can find the data, Fanny. I'll find the data. It's all on RMA's website. So I'll look that up for Nebraska, and then we can run, data from 2016 to 2022 and look at the number of acres insured for PRF. And then, we can see the number of policies. So if that's going up, et cetera, I can look that up.
Okay. Also, Mike Schellenberger, he's the TA from Washington for Intertribal Agriculture Council, and he typed in here for your information, Jaime, He says, Jaime and I grew up in the same town, now only live 20 miles from each other. Jaime lived next to my cousin and is a good friends with Yakima Nation Farms manager. They both have a good friendship and have found Jaime to be very honest and has good ethics. I share this because just last week, one of my tribes in my region called and wanted my feedback on Jaime because they were considering buying insurance from him. I felt confident in giving him a great recommendation. So that's just letting you know that the tribes out here in the Northwest are really looking at these policies.
Thank you, Mike.
We have a response from Gary Heilig. He says, yes, there are many producers in Nebraska that purchase PFR. He can get the data that you need to show the amount of producers that have purchased the policy. Gary Heilig Jr., Crop West Insurance Incorporated. And an anonymous attendee said there is participation in Nebraska, but not sure on the tribes. Lantana, she says, will an indemnity payment cover the producer premium?
The answer to that, yes. So if we were looking at some of these scenarios, right? So we'll just take this one, for example, the producer premium is $476,522. Well, the indemnity was $1,585,035. So that indemnity will pay for the premium first. And so the net total for that year of 2021 would have been $1.1 million. So yes, if you trigger claims early on, right, they'll pay down your premium first. And then if there's money left over, right, from after your premium's paid, then you'll receive the rest. And so that's where we get the net total and then the running total as well. And that's what we want, right? We don't want you to have to pay your premium. We want you to at least cover your premium. And there are some instances where, because your premium is due September 1st, if we selected maybe a July or August interval, RMA doesn't publish this data until 30 or 60 days after the interval's over. So if you're insuring, a July or August interval, even anything after that, we'd want you to pay your premium, because, after, September 30th, the bill's due September 1st, and it goes to September 30th. After that, you can incur interest charges, right? We don't want that. So we would just advise you pay your premium. If you haven't received all your indemnities, pay that, and then let the other intervals play out. And then after that's done, after you've paid and you've triggered claims, then they'll send you the check for the rest, whatever you were owed. Good question.
And Elise said we haven't so far had any questions come from Facebook.
Okay.
And we don't have any open questions right now.
Okay.
Oh, Lantana has one more question. On the spreadsheet, what is the average index?
So the average index, that's from RMA, right? So, or for NOAA takes that average precipitation, or the precipitation for that specific grid in that location, and the average index is, so let's take this one, for example, is 90%. Okay, so if that's for that specific grid for all the years, right? It's they take the historical data and they average that out for that specific grid and that interval for however many years they've had the data. And so if the precipitation drops below that average index, that's when you receive an indemnity. So when we run this analysis, we can go back again 70 years if we want to, but when we run this analysis, anywhere you see the shades of purple or light purple, that means that interval in that year the precipitation was below that average index. And so that means you're going to receive a payment. Good question.
Okay, we have a couple more from Fanny Brewer.
Okay.
She's asking, are all horses covered, or does it depend on the horses used for? I may have heard it wrong, but they may not be covered at all. Here in the Great Plains, we have many large horse producers, not wild horses, but performance and production stock.
Yes, if you own them and they're domesticated, right? Yes, that counts. Wild horses, feral horses, right? I mean, they're just roaming free and nobody owns them. You know, those, and that doesn't count, but they've got to be owned. They're your livestock, that counts.
I kind of have a question, as we have Yakima Nation in our region out here. And they have a really severe feral horse problem on their reservation. And you ran the data on the Yakima Nation. So you also know that they could really benefit from this program. How do those horses factor into there? Because it's like deer or elk, but it's just like 10,000 deer or elk.
Yeah, they're a non-factor because it's all based on the precipitation. The only peril is that lack of precipitation. And so what the producer is, so let's just take the Yakima Nation. If they wanted a PRF policy, well, they would have to own livestock, right? Cattle, horses, swine. We listed livestock. And so they would have to own or show proof that they own livestock. And that's it. As far as feral wild horses, it's a non-factor, right? Because they don't own them. It's all based on lack of precipitation.
Okay. Do we have any other questions out there? Somebody type something in the chat.
Okay.
No questions out of Facebook. That's the second time we've posted that. So